Okay, so let me start. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and I would like to I would like to pay my respects to their past, present, and emerging. And I hope that actually we can be loyal basically to what has been inherited to us. So I would like to welcome you all to today's seminar on women in transport engineering. We have been fortunate to have four inspiring and very successful women in this field. So we are basically gathered today to learn from their experiences, that how they could basically overcome the barriers and how they could pave the way for us. Transport engineering is an emerging field, and we have noticed that we have more female entering this field, and we acknowledge that the contributions that women around the world has made to this field has been truly transformative. And without further ado, I would like to welcome you all, Professor Sue McNeil, Rebecca Want, Marika Kalfas, and Hermione Pearson. So let me just hand it over to you. Thank you so much. Yes, I would actually change the.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to do the other ones.
All right. Sorry for that. Yeah. So, well, the agenda. Yeah, I forgot about the agenda. So we're going to start with the panel discussion, and after that, Sue actually is moderator, and we're going to have also a survey that we would appreciate if you also fill it out. We will send a link to the survey as well. And we're good? Yep. All right.
Thank you. So welcome, everyone. We're delighted to have everyone here, and we're going to put Hermione on so we can see her. Excellent. Thank you. Good. This idea grew out of a meeting that Ellie and I went to last November, where we heard some speakers in women in transport and went, wow, we'd like to hear more about this. And recognized an opportunity for networking events. And it was fabulous to be in a room where there were a lot of people that looked like ourselves. There were women. We're delighted to have some men here. Thank you for coming. It's fabulous. And we always welcome that. But it's nice to be with some other women and sort of hear about experiences and ideas for helping us network and build careers. So over the last 7 or 8 months, we sort of hatched this idea. It took a while to get it together and find dates that work for people, where we wanted to focus on networking or other tools to help you in your career. And it's whether it's your mentors or a boss, or Rebecca used the word a sponsor when we were talking about it, and some people have a coach. And it's how you take advantage of these. What do you look for? How do you actually, as a mentee or an employee, take advantage to build your career and think about opportunities and where you're going? And what you get in this group of people is some amazing role models. We also put together a website, and that was the QR code that was up there that has some videos of a whole bunch of women academics from around the world. Others have also promised us those videos. And as you go through them, they have some great pieces of advice on. There's pieces of advice I heard when I listened to the videos that I said, I wish I'd had that advice long ago, or I wish I was giving that advice to my students. So there's lots of opportunities. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is sort of get started. We're going to work with this panel to sort of explore some different ideas, and then we'll open it up to questions for you, and hopefully we'll get some good conversations going. So I'd like to just sort of step back for a minute and do a bit more formal introduction. On this end of the panel, we have Marika Kalfas. She's the CEO of New South Wales Ports. She's got a Bachelor of Environmental Engineering from University of New South Wales. Yay, UNSW. But she likes to spread her allegiance around. So she also has a Master's of Environmental Management from UTS, a Master's degree in Environmental Law from University of Sydney. And she's got over 20 years experience in the port sector. Hermione Parsons is online. She's the Chief Executive Officer of the Office of the Australian Logistics Council. She has a Master's of Urban Planning in Intermodal Freight Systems from University of Melbourne and a PhD from Monash University. And it's nice to see someone with a PhD actually working in this sector, not in an academic role, because there's lots of different career paths you can follow. So over her 3-decade career, she's worked in both the private and public sector. And she's co-founder and co-chair of the initiative Wayfinder Supply Chain Careers for Women. And then on my left is Rebecca Want. Rebecca is the market leader transport for GHD Sydney. She's a graduate of University of Sydney Civil Engineering, and she also spreads her allegiance around with a Master of Engineering Science in Project Management from UNSW. She's got more than 25 years experience in both the public and private sectors with an emphasis on rail. And she's chair of the Australasian Railway Association Women in Rail. So we've got a sort of a focus on rail and ports today, but that doesn't mean these people don't interact with all kinds of different modes, different areas. So we wanted to start off thinking a little bit about this idea of the mentor. And I thought I'd start with Marika and ask her if she could sort of describe an influential mentor and the role that mentor might have played in her career. I'm going to give you the microphone.
Okay. I've got a loud voice too, so I can talk up if you need to. If you can't hear me, just wave at the back. My views might be a little different to some. I think for me the most beneficial approaches have been a more informal approach to mentoring or being mentees. Identifying people that you respect, that you think have the experience that you are after at that point in time to get some advice or some guidance on. And I don't see that coming from one individual. So for me, through my career, sometimes it's been a senior person in the area I've been working on where I wanted some guidance on how to understand things more technically or progress in that area more technically. In other parts of my career, it's been someone in more of a management role who gives you advice on how to manage people, difficult situations, teams, and then there may be other people as well in terms of how you look to progress your career for new opportunities. So I think my takeaway would be broaden your church of people that you have there to help guide and support and leverage. And doesn't have to be formal. I actually think the best ones are informal. At no point have any of the people I've engaged with, I've said, you're my mentor or I'm your mentee. And I don't think we had that mentor-mentee title. It was simply you get to know them, you get to know what they do, you get to respect them, and you would respect their advice. They also know you and a little bit about you, and not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, they have some understanding of who you are, where you've been. And then when you chat with them and you have a discussion about the potential challenge you're facing or request for sort of advice on going forward, that you are targeting it to the person whose advice you actually think will be appropriate and beneficial. So I might start there.
You want to? Okay. So Hermione, you mentioned when we talked on Friday that you also had a slightly different take. So we'd like to hear that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much for having me. Like Marika, I have a different take because I have been part of mentor programs and actually haven't found them anywhere near as useful or as helpful or as maybe authentic would be the way I describe it, as the relationships I've had with so many people throughout my career. And I think, as Marika is saying, for me, the issue is that there is respect, that you know the person in some way. You have met these people and they have had an opportunity to realise that you are a decent sort of person, that you're genuine in your interests, that you have a platform of understanding that is worthy. It is, you're not just a junior. You're not just on trainer wheels. You're actually understanding issues about the topic. So you're working in terms of understanding the issues. And I think the generosity of people is probably the most wonderful part of understanding relationships and seeing how much and how willing people are to help. And so all through my career, if I can't understand something, then I'll find out, well, who, even in my earlier part of my career, I'd find out, well, who can I really talk to about this issue? And then inevitably, if you reach out to someone and say, look, I'm just wondering, could you talk to me about this? I've got a bit of a problem where I'm thinking it through. And people are so generous with their time and so good in terms of the help that they will give you, that I've always found that's the way that I prefer to operate. And then the other thing about being a mentor, and I can't even stand the word mentee because I'm a bit of a pedantic sort of person with language. But I find that the essential factor is that when you approach someone, if you approach them in a transactional way, I want you to be my mentor and I'll be the mentee, then I think that is not the best way of doing it. Because what you're doing is you're establishing a structure that people may or may not want to participate in. And you're also in fundamental to that idea is that there will be an ongoing responsibility. So from my own experience, I've found that if I reach out to people and just treat it as an enjoyment of getting to know that person and an enjoyment of understanding their views on the world, their views on supply chain, etc., then there's a more natural conversation that's possible without any responsibility being put on people. And therefore, for me, I found that to be a much better way going forward for them, but also for me. It allows me the flexibility that I really appreciate. I hope that's a good introduction.
Rebecca's ready to say something here.
Look, I very much share your views around building respect and developing relationships and learning from that. I have recently helped and been a mentor and a mentee in a program run by the Australian Railway Association for Women in Rail, and it was really beneficial. I went in to gain to be a mentee so that I could learn how to be on a board, and I specifically asked to be matched with someone who had that board experience. So that was really helpful for me because it was my first time doing such a role, and I was really keen to understand how to hold myself and how to participate and how to give my best to that particular role. So that was quite a short program, but I had a very clear purpose. I knew what I needed out of that relationship. And equally, I was a mentor to a woman in the program as well. And she came in, she had a background as being a train driver and she wanted to move into management. And we talked about her goal, and within the 5 months, she had been offered a promotion in a learning and development role, which was something that she had her heart set on. So, when you have a very specific goal, it can be a really wonderful relationship.
So in the academic environment, the specific goals of tenures and promotion processes actually require very significant mentoring. And I got interested in mentoring because I'd hear my colleagues saying, oh, I talk to that person all the time. And I'd hear the conversation in the cold way that said, just do what I do. And that's not mentoring. So it's the specifics of what you need in what particular context. It's this idea that you need relationships with different kinds of people and for different stages in your life for different purposes. So the specific of what does it take to get into management, or what do I need to do to be on a board versus the general career advice and the bouncing ideas off people is very important. So there's different opportunities. So one of the challenges is, how do you find this person that you can interact with and develop a relationship with. So let's start with you, Rebecca, if any suggestions.
I've got so many suggestions. First of all, the Women in Bingo activity that we did this morning was fantastic. So I've met Ali, I've met Pernilla, I've met Anissa and Clay, and instantly I picked up stories from what your passion is and what you do. And so just I think getting out there and being involved and connecting. So hats off to everyone for showing up today, because it is when you show up and when you connect and when you share your stories, you won't always find that instant connection, but you will find a connection. And what I loved after I'd gone around the room and basically put myself onto you, you might have been shy, you might have been looking down, that you then got up and went and made other connections. So keep on doing that. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
I think the point that Rebecca made, be present, go out and involve yourself in things. So you'll pick up people that you work with or that you're studying with, or your lecturers and the like. So there's people in your everyday circle. Then you'll have projects that may involve cross-collaboration with others in other locations, other unis, in industry, etc. And you'll meet people through those processes, and they will get to know you as well, and you get to know a bit about them. Then look for other opportunities with, in my case, for example, industry associations. We have a plethora of industry associations, and you get out of them what you put in. So there are often working groups in industry associations that you can participate on if your organisation or is a member. Just take the time to do that. Take the time to go and participate. Take the time to go to their events as well. And a number of them have networking for usually for younger people as well. So I think it's about just engaging with the people you work with every day, or the people you have around you every day. Continue to do that throughout your career. You start to build a network. The other thing is sometimes you have a good relationship with someone, and this has happened to people, well, to me a lot. They will have a good relationship with someone. That person says, "Oh, I actually think Marika might be a good person just to have a chat to. Why don't you I'll reach out to her, see if she's happy to have a cup of coffee with you, and go and have a cup of coffee." So again, it's not a formal mentor-mentee relationship, but the individual I know will say, "Listen, this individual is looking for some advice on blah, or is seeking a next step in their career, or wants to get into ports or supply chains. Would you mind having a cup of coffee with them?" And I say, "Of course, not a problem." And then you meet them, and then you have a chat about what they want out of it. So there are a whole lot of ways of doing it that aren't necessarily formalized. And some of the formalized ones, the one like Rebecca mentioned, that sounded like it was very targeted, specific industry with specific people having specific purpose. But a generic one isn't necessarily the way to go to get you the best advice on how to resolve the issue, the problem, the next decision that you need to make.
Yeah, I've had fantastic people who mentored me from the very beginning of my career, but we never saw it as mentoring, and I didn't anyway. So finding, for example, for me, finding a supervisor for my master's thesis was really important, to find the right person. And then that person became a long-term friend. When I did my PhD, finding the right person who would be my supervisor for my PhD was a very serious, I think that was probably one of the more serious relationships to find, because you're together for 3 years and 10 months in my case. And he became a great, and is still a great friend of mine. And every so often, we might not see each other for a year or so, but then you do, and you have lunch or dinner, and there's just an ongoing sense of relationship that I think is important. And similarly, people that I've worked for when I first left university and started working with my degrees finished, those people are still friends of mine. And so enduring relationships, I think, are really important. And it also means that you have people who understand where you come from, understand how your mind and how your thoughts are progressing, understand how your career is progressing. Often they're the people you call on as a referee as well, to be your referee. But they have an understanding of you that is enjoyable in some ways too. It's an enjoyable relationship. Someone said to me, I can't remember who it was, but someone said, that they believed, they were told that you have to make sure, as in a mentee-mentor formal relationship, that what you get out of it as the mentee is equal to what the mentor gets out of it. And coming from supply chain, I think that's not quite the way the world works, because if you're a mentor, you're actually donating your time. And a mentor is investing in helping people. But what does the mentor get out of it? I think what the mentor gets out is a sense of, helping people and participating in career development. But do they really get anything personal out of it? Probably not. What they're getting out of it is a warm sense of doing the right thing. But I think it's the wrong way of seeing mentor-mentee relationships, because if you are approaching it in that way, in my view, you're understanding that someone's going to be giving you time, precious time. Someone's going to be helping you with generous thoughts. And that is a gift to be really enjoyed. So I think maybe that's my contribution at this point, rather than going on too long. Back to you, Sue.
So one of the things we're hearing is this idea that showing up, participating, pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, to introduce yourself to people and engage. And so the easiest way to engage with somebody is to ask them questions about themselves, but then you practicing this idea of being a reasonable person, of interacting in different ways, for sharing and saying, well, what's your experience on this? And then coming back to it. And so building this relationship takes time, and it's not going to be, this is sort of one of the problems with formal mentoring programs, is it doesn't occur instantly. It's an organic process that you might have 5, 10, 20 different mentors for different things. And the depth of that relationship and how you interact with them, whether it's at a meeting like this or having lunch or coffee or a telephone conversation, varies significantly. And so this idea of as a mentee trying to respect the mentor's time, but also it's a two-way street. You've got to do that interaction. And so if it's not working, you move forward and think about somebody else. And so as those relationships with mentees evolve, I'm sort of interested in hearing, when you've had mentees, why has the relationship worked? So do you want to try it, Rebecca?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think the things that work is, I think you might have touched on it before. You'll sort of get back what you give in terms of the relationship. So that has certainly worked. The particular, I guess, a sponsor that I have in my business at the moment is very kind and generous with ideas, and it's a bit of a coach and asks me lots of questions about how I'm going and what I'm doing. So I think I get a lot from him, but I also need to make sure that I'm giving back to him. So providing insights on what's happening in our business in other ways, or, making sure that I keep him connected in what will bring value to him as well. So I think the other thing is to be useful, right? So we're talking about you give and you get back, but how can we be useful to each other? I think that sort of ties in the first point. And I think finally, that follow through. So, I have people say to me, could you be my mentor? And I say, yeah, sure, let's make a time. And then I never hear back again, right? That person, don't do that. It's not great. So that's that idea of following through and making sure that if you say you're going to do something, that you do it. I don't know if I've gone off track, but.
Well, I guess for me, I probably wouldn't put my hand up to say I'll be someone's mentor in a formalized sense. I am very happy to meet with people who are after advice or guidance or direction, for their specific, need, where they think I can be of benefit to them. And so not calling it a mentor-mentee relationship, because that puts a lot of pressure on both the mentee and the mentor to continue to have this relationship. And if it doesn't work, what happens then? You've got a mentee that's got a more senior person, presumably, as their mentor, and they're sort of like, well, I don't really want to go to that anymore, or I don't really like the advice they're giving me. How do you end that? Is it just you stop talking to them, and then how do you continue to engage with them? So you'd have to be really confident that both the mentor and the mentee are likely to develop a really long-term, positive, engaged relationship. So in my view, it's about, as a mentee, going in and knowing what it is you want to get out of it. It's not just, hi, how are you? Let's have a chat. Tell me what you're thinking, etc. It's my latest thing is I would like to move up into management, or I want to change roles. I want to move out of where I am, and I want to go into a different organisation. This is an actual example of an individual who came and had a coffee with me. She said, I'm looking at other options, and she said, I've been looking at this type of company and that type of company. I'm just not sure. What are your thoughts about those companies, and what are your thoughts about other companies? So again, not expecting an answer, because it's not for the mentor to tell you a solution, but the mentor asks questions. So it's okay. What are you particularly looking to get out of this next role? What is it you like in your current role? What is it you don't like? What sort of working environment are you after? And having a chat about that, and then just saying, okay, have you thought about these types of companies, or this company, or I've heard this company's looking for some new people in that area. Maybe you would like to approach them. So it's that type of discussion where the mentee knows that there's something specific they're after at this point in their career or time, and they ask the mentor for their thoughts, and not expecting that the mentor is going to actually give them the answer, because the mentor can't give you the answer. All they can do is ask a lot of questions and make some suggestions and suggest you think about this or think about that. And really just taking those. And then I think the nice thing to do is to follow back. In one case, the individual I had the coffee with, she came back and she said, I got a job at this place and I'm really happy. And it's like, great. And so then when she had another thing she wanted to bounce off, she rang and she just said, look, could we have another cup of coffee? I'd love to bounce something off you. And we met up again. So, and that was probably 9-12 months later. It doesn't have to be immediate. It's whenever that need arises. So, that's an example.
Hermione, do you have any other examples like that? Because those examples, I think, are really helpful for thinking about how you interact with people.
Yeah, I think so. The question, why has the relationship worked when it's happened? And I was thinking about it in terms of two examples. One is, I actually said to a person that works with me the other day, I'm terrified. This thing that I'm doing on Monday is about mentoring. And I actually, have different views to, as Sue Alnaz and I spoke about. I said, I have different views to normal mentoring programs. And I said to her, I'm really no good at mentoring. And she just roared with laughter. And she said, you mentor all the time. And I realized I do. And she's worked with me in 3 different companies, 3 different relationships. And I kind of figure, that's getting serious. So mentoring is something that I do all the time, if we're going to name it. And I love doing it. But it's as Marika describes. And what I thought might be helpful is when you look at mentoring, if you bring it down to what is it really about, it's about work. It's about careers. It's about progression. It's about how does an individual make their way through a working life in a way that really is positive and problem solving. And, the world of work is a tricky thing to negotiate and to understand. So if we look at mentoring and what it's really about, it's about how can someone else help you do better in work. And it's not about networking. It's not about socializing. It's not about, it's about a very clear outcome. And that's probably why I like to approach it in the informal way rather than through formal mentoring. And so I thought, well, how can I describe this in a way? What I think is, if I'm honest and being grown up about it, then how do I see mentoring? And it's about one person seeking the help of another person to understand something better, either the topic or the way the world works or management or tricky problems that you encounter in your workplace. So it's not about friendship necessarily. That's a lovely outcome if it happens. It's not social, meaning you go and chat about lots of nice, sweet things. It's actually a purposeful relationship. That's how I see it. And I'll paraphrase this with, I set up a network called Women in Supply Chain in 2005 because a whole lot of women wanted to be able to network together. So women in supply chain, they were from transport, logistics, and supply chain. So I set up this network. But I don't want to be part of that network, because what I want to do is just network with all sorts of people, male, female, I don't care if they've got 2 heads or 9. What I want to do is to understand the issue around freight logistics or supply chain or transport or management, or how do you deal with recruitment better, or how do you deal with the very difficult things of redundancy? How do you deal with management issues? And so I set up the Women in Supply Chain, and it's still going, and it's a network. It's a group of women that want to talk to each other and network and have that experience. Whereas I really enjoy a different way of approaching my work. I also established this Wayfinder Supply Chain Careers for Women program, which is about attracting women, a pipeline of women, into a male-dominated industry. So it's very outcomes focused. And then also I've attended quite often different groups with the National Association of Women in Operations. It's a fantastic group called NAWO, and they focus on mentoring women in supply chain and operations in particular. So those 3 examples, WISC, Women in Supply Chain, that's about social networking. Wayfinder is about pipeline generation, and NAWO is about mentoring. So each has a very different purpose. So I thought maybe those examples could be helpful as explaining why has the relationship worked. In WISC, it's because people want to have a glass of wine and chat. In Wayfinder, it's about bringing people together that want to create a pipeline of women. And in NAWO, it's about real serious mentoring, formal mentoring programs. So maybe breaking it down into what is the purpose, what is the outcome that's being sought, and I'll go back to my first point. I think people are the most generous things in the world, which is fantastic, and they'll offer you help. But you need to be very specific about what help you're seeking.
Great. Lots of different ideas. So I just wanted to throw out a few examples of some of the interactions I've had with my informal and formal mentees over the years. So some of those in an academic environment, a lot of it is working through the process of how to get promoted, what you need to do, assembling the material, who you might suggest that write letters for you of support, because in academic environments, this is a very rigid process to some extent and takes a lot of doing. There's also the part of it that in an academic environment it's teaching, it's research and service. And so that service is things like being involved in professional organizations. It's being the editor of a journal or an associate editor of a journal. And so using your mentor or someone you interact with to ask, how do I get on that journal? You don't call up the editor and say, I'd like to be an associate editor, having never submitted a paper and never written a review for that journal. So this is specific versions of these things. I've had interactions with a mentee where I've had to deal with sexual harassment, which was horrible for all of us. But it was a safe space to have to deal with it and confront the university of the problem. And you don't want to be in that situation. There's situations where you think about strategies to get a mentee nominated for an award. So Rebecca had mentioned this idea of sponsorship. And so as a mentor, you'd like to think about that. But sometimes as a mentee, you can ask the question of, Are there awards that I should be looking at to exploring getting nominated for? And some of you are very young and not thinking about awards, but there are awards for young people to start to think about that, to work out how to get involved. And some of you just want a nice, steady job. You want an outstanding work-life balance, but you sometimes need someone to help you navigate through that process. I always tell people that there's never a good time to have children. It just doesn't exist, right? And so, sometimes you want to keep that as your personal decision, but sometimes there's someone you want to talk through with those kinds of ideas. Or is there a good time to just quit and go to another country and do something completely different? Or I'm in a different country, and how do I navigate through this process to help me understand how to make this work? So this is the idea that a formal mentoring program won't necessarily address all those things. And I really liked Hermione's example of the 3 different organizations that did really different things. But professional organizations play an important part in this, and sort of working out how, finding your people, finding your tribe, and working out how to interact makes a lot of sense. So I'm just wondering if, following up on that, you had any other ideas. So I'll start with Marika and then come back to Rebecca.
Any other ideas?
Organizations or groups that support.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to, I guess, your circle and where you're working or where you're operating in. So in my case, for example, we've got Australian Logistics Council, which Hermione's the CEO of. We've got Ports Australia, Infrastructure Partnerships Australia. Like, I could list you 10 different ones. I presume also for yourselves, there's Engineers Australia as well, which also helps you if you participate in some of their committees and I actually did participate in some of the Engineers Australia committees early in my career. You participate in some of theirs, then you obviously get to meet people and they get to meet you, and you can be an active participant. You can be just turn up for their events. So I think it just depends. In transport, there's the Australian Railways Association, there's the Roads Association as well. So there's a whole lot of different industry associations, many of which you can only get into though if your organisations at the uni or the company you work for are actually members. And similarly with Engineers Australia, you sign up as a member, which they do have student members for. So I think it's really just looking for those sorts of opportunities the uni puts on as well. The uni would put on quite a lot, I'd imagine, across different faculties. You don't need to stick to the Faculty of Transport events. Maybe go and participate in some of the other events. Doesn't have to be engineering. It can be outside of engineering. So I think it's just really looking at where you can find those opportunities, and just turning up and then being actively engaged with meeting people. Everyone is very open to meeting people. Usually they're pretty good.
Practice not looking at shoes.
Yeah, and just going around and saying, hi, this is who I am, this is what I do, what do you do? And then building just those connections through those processes. So yeah, probably not much more. And then just knowing what it is you want to get out of it. As Hermione says, what is it you're trying to do? Just build the network at this point, get some advice, or have a formal program.
Thank you. Look, a little bit of the same, but I think be of service. We're in a community and we can all help each other. So we might be in research or we might be at the early stages of our education. No matter what we do and where we're at in our career or our studies, we can help others somehow. So a little example from me, my niece is a teenager and certainly could do with some help and some guidance. So that's some service, and I'll be looking out for her as one of my family, but also looking out for other people around you and how you can help. So think about that. I think the awards is a really important one. In industry associations, we do get to judge awards and encourage people to attend and contribute to awards. They're hard. They're probably like writing your research grants and the like, but it's worth it. In the rail industry, we've had a $10,000 award for young achievers. Up until a few years ago, we'd get 2 to 3 submissions. So about a year out, I start tapping people on the shoulder and say, this is coming up, this will change your life. You should go for it and you're worthy. So I think, look out for those things. And if you are in a position to help others feel worthy, and tap them on the shoulder to go for those sort of awards, or support them, or offer to proof or edit there. You guys are great writers. How can you help others, but also be helping yourself? And I think just that idea about getting involved, it's priceless. You never know who you'll meet. In our industry associations, we have never got enough helpers. So it's always falls to a few people to do the work, but people love you when you do come in and you are quite specific. I can help you run this event, or I can help you with your social media, or, etc. So, be useful, be of service.
I just wanted to tell a little story of one of my advisees who had a summer internship during her master's program. And I sort of spoke to her and said, well, how's it going? She said, it's really boring. I get a job, a project, and I finish it in 2 hours. And then I have to go and bother my boss to say, I need something else. And he said, can't you think of something else to do? Anyway, after a week of this, she sort of thought, I've got to think about how to engage with people. And so it was in the US, so she put a candy dish on her desk. And people would come by and say, can I have a piece of candy? And would talk to her about their projects. And she took the bull by the horns, essentially, and got engaged in a whole bunch of things and learned a lot by these interactions that weren't just this one person who'd been assigned to her, who sort of had these little things for her to do, because she was an intern, only an intern in his mind. And it turned out to be an amazing summer. So sometimes you have to think creatively about interacting with people in different ways. So, Hermione, you got any interesting ways to think about how you creatively interact with people? So one of the disadvantages here is you probably have 4 extroverts sitting up the front, but it doesn't always come naturally to us. Sometimes we don't. We know we have to do it to interact with other people. So any words of wisdom?
Yes, I do. I have some words of wisdom. If anyone's going to say no, don't let it be yourself. So don't be scared and reach out. Push yourself to meet people beyond your circle. And one of the things that I found, I did work in academia for a while, setting up a applied research development centre. Academia is very different to government, and they are very different to the private sector. Now, I figure we're talking to women in transport. I can't see you, but I'm figuring that you're all studying engineering and transport and the like. And the chances are, if you stay in academia, you're probably in a female-male, maybe even a female-dominated environment, academia per se, not necessarily the faculty. If you're in government, you're probably lots of females, but more senior you get, less females. But the reason to say this is that if you're looking at going into the private sector, it's a different culture. It's a different environment. And women in transport, we are in the minority. So we are working in, if it's not academia and it's not government, then women in transport are working in a male-dominated industry, a fast-aging, male-dominated industry. So the issue then is never betray yourself. We are females and we never betray ourselves. But you have to think about how men, say, in business think, which is different to the way academics or female academics in academia might think, or a manager in government might think. So there's also another issue here about if you have a career path that takes you into the private sector, you need to be thinking about it maybe differently to the way others might be thinking. Finding your tribe is important, but don't be limited by it. So I find as a female in male-dominated industry, which I have chosen to be in since I was 30, that I expect that I'm going to be with not many women around. And if they are around, like Marika and I have a dear friendship, very lucky. But if you're in a male-dominated industry, you've got to find the right men who are going to help you. And therefore, you have to push beyond your comfort zone. And I think informal mentoring is also about really being clear about, wow, that person, I really like what that person's doing. And then approaching that person, saying, could you help me? This is what I really would like to talk to you about. And I found the world of work just fascinating because of that. And people open their hearts and their generosity. That's
Great.
my thought.
All right. Ideas?
Oh, I'm going to just say, don't forget the lunchroom or the lunch area. My best sort of experiences are from that, building, just chatting to people. That does start with just chatting. I've learned all about golf, and I don't play golf, but I know everything about golf. I know all the rules. I couldn't play it, but I could score it. As a result of having to sit through conversations around people's golf days. But in return, I got a lot of insights into like a whole range of things, including technical matters, including the history of the organisation and where all the skeletons are buried, all of those things. So yeah, don't forget the lunchroom.
Yeah, if I can add to that, in this day where we can do a lot of our work remotely or we can be at home, think carefully about that a little bit. To your point, Marika, when I first joined our business, it was through COVID, and a really beautiful young man would come into the office all the time, and there would be not many other people through the office because there was a real option to work from home. And I said to him, it's amazing. I love coming here and seeing you here. And he said, Rebecca, I realised that if I was here, then when it was coming time to put big teams together for projects, I'd be front of mind. And I was like, oh my God, you're so smart. So honestly, don't forget to show up. Presenteeism, if there's a bias now towards we choose the people that we can see and that we're connected with. There can be very, very smart people beavering away at home, heads down, writing great academic publications or being able to do great analysis or develop great models. But if you can't see them and they're not visible to people making decisions about who we might put on our next project, who we might choose to go to a conference, who we might support in any other way, if we don't know you're out there because you've got your heads down, it's really hard to pick you.
That's great advice. So this comes back to the showing up. When I was talking to some of the women who did the videos, Elise Miller-Hawks said to me, and she didn't put this in her video, but Elise, who's a transportation faculty at George Mason University, but has been at several other institutions, she said, the importance of showing up, for being present to it, but engaging when you're there. And whether that's at a conference or in the office, I always say that some of the best projects have come out of fortuitous conversations I had in the corridor. So that's why my student Rachel's idea of putting the candy dish on her desk turned out very clever, a very smart way of doing it. So it's thinking about these different ideas. So before we open it up to questions from the floor, so be thinking about that, I would like each of you to just say, are there things you wish you'd done differently in your careers? Who wants to go first? It's a
Yemi? Any ideas? Yemi and I worked on Sydney Metro together for a few years. Yes, and it's opening day. Look, I think one thing, it's really, really important to think about how you make other people feel. And certainly for me, when I was dead set on getting outcomes on major programs like Metro, potentially I wasn't as aware of how I was making other people feel. And I think that's a really important thing. If you can think about how you're making people feel, it's a really good learning. Yeah.
There's obviously going to be lots of different examples of where you could have approached something differently, you could have delivered something differently, you could have probably taken a different path. But I would have to say, in the main, I don't think there's one thing that I would highlight to say I would do differently. There are lots of things I think I would do again. I'd like not to have to work for awful people. That would be great. but you don't actually get a choice in that. And actually the awful people make you realize what you don't want to do when you become more senior. And I think they are some of the best lessons that you get. So I think it's really to draw from what are those lessons you get, irrespective of whether you took the right decision, made the right call or not, and then try to learn from that and not do it again. And that's, I think, a really important thing. Just learn from everything that you do, learn what you would have done differently and try and do it differently next time, I think.
I love that, Marika. I love that. I'm lucky I was on quiet, because if I had had my speaker on, you would have heard me roar with laughter. Oh my gosh. So what I wish I'd done differently, I think people will be surprised for me to say this, but when I was doing my master's degree and then my PhD, I was having children. My children are 37 and 35 years of age, so you can tell it was a long time ago. And I did it so that I could change careers and go into non-traditional female work, because I had been a teacher and I was a bit bored with it. So I loved it, but I wanted to see what the world of work had to offer in different ways. And I used to be so worried to reach out to people. So until I was probably about maybe 40, I was actually extremely worried about every time I reached out to anyone. I was scared. And at that point, you would have said, is she an outgoing person or is she more reserved? I used to be terrified of speaking to people who I thought had, amazing careers. And so one reason, it wasn't a big problem because I soon got over it, but it did stop me and it held me back, because I always tried to be 150% prepared for everything rather than going and having a discussion, asking for help. And so that would probably be one. And then the other would be when I did my PhD, because I was having children, I thought I'd understand the world of work. I thought I'd come out with a PhD and understand, I'd be wise. That's what I thought. And then I found out that no, a PhD does not give you wisdom. It gives you a lot of knowledge about one thing. So I turned to horoscopes. So the reason to say that is that the world of work is a very complicated place. And one thing that I would advise is, if you're doing transport and engineering, say, make sure you do some short courses along your career that are in very different areas. Not big, long ones, maybe 6 weeks here, 2 weeks there, but try and really broaden your understanding away from your academic discipline. They're my 2 thoughts.
Awesome advice. So I have 2 thoughts on this. One is, I think looking back on my 40-year academic career, it's awfully long, I wish I'd taken some more risks. So one of those things, and it seems a little strange, is in 40 years of being an academic, I only took 2 sabbaticals. Sabbaticals are this amazing thing for academics to be able to go and explore doing something different. But the logistics of thinking about how do you go somewhere else and get going was just fraught with uncertainty and risk, and I was never quite willing to do that until I got much older. And I look back and regret that. And the other thing is, I've always said, choose your battles. There are some things you just sort of basically, I say, suck it up. You can't fight the world and do everything else. But I wish I'd have been a bit more feisty and fought back a few times and said, this is not appropriate, or this is the kind of thing you need to do, or we need to be more supportive of these students, or change the world in thinking about delivering. And I don't have a solution to how I would have done that looking back at my younger self. When you get old, you get more introspective and willing to sort of do that. But you do have to choose your battles. But sometimes we should take on a few more in trying to do that. So I'd like to actually open it up for some questions now. You have one here.
Hello, beautiful ladies. I want to ask something. Can you share about the healthy boundary with the relationship with the mentor or mentee? Something about the coaching? Thank you.
Yeah, look, I think in terms of setting some boundaries, when you have your first mentor-mentee discussion, it's always really good just to set a few aligning points. So, we'll meet every month, or I'll call you through work, or actually you're really, really welcome to call or text me anytime. So boundaries need to be for both parties. So I really think you need to have that conversation one-on-one, really nice and upfront. Anyone else?
Well, thank you. That was an interesting panel discussion. So from your previous position, what are some of the challenges that you face and how you overcome them to be in your position now?
Well, it's interesting. There's sort of different challenges at different times. I think early on, and I'm a bit like Hermione, I've been in predominantly, or Rebecca probably too, male-dominated work environments for all of my career. And so I think one of the key challenges I had was having people listen to you around a table. It was interesting. I got to the point where if I had an idea, it was often better to convince one of my male colleagues about that idea and let them bring it in, because it often wouldn't be listened to. So that's quite an interesting dynamic when you see that around the table. So it's important. I've also seen women who then try and push their idea at a meeting and around the table, which actually backfires on them quite significantly. So it's quite a delicate balance as to the environment you're in and how open they are to those ideas. So I think that for me was one key challenge. And then in a similar way, getting people to identify you for promotion opportunities. In fact, two of my early ones, I actually had to walk in to the boss's office and say, okay, such and such is leaving. I would like to be considered for that role. I believe I can do it. I've got the background. And in one case, I actually suggested they bring two groups together and that I would take over that one. And so it's trying to get people, it's putting up your hand and saying, hey, think about this, because often the boss is not thinking about that. They're thinking about a million other things. They haven't really thought it through. If you go in and present them with an opportunity, then it forces them to think about it, and they have to consciously say no rather than actually just being silent. So maybe they're just two examples. You have anything?
Yeah, look, it's a tricky one, because if you think about the world of work, it's all about people. It's not actually about transport. It's not actually about engineering. It's about people, and it's about relationships. And as females in male-dominated industry, sometimes we're too forward, sometimes we're too quiet, sometimes we're too inexperienced, sometimes we're too experienced, sometimes we're too feisty, sometimes we're not. So I just think you have to work it. But in previous positions, I think you just, like Marika was saying, it's the discussions in the kitchen. One thing that's just occurred to me. One of the things that I've learned about the work of men, that is in male-dominated industry, is that men are the biggest gossips in the world. Women, we don't have anything. We don't have anything on them. They are the biggest gossips. And Marika's point about the lunchroom is so correct. They gossip like mad. My joy is that they don't gossip with me, because I don't like gossip. But they gossip like crazy. And so that's something to think about, that in the world of work, where it's a male-dominated industry, and it's really about people, it's not about transport or all the interesting things that I think are fascinating, it's about people. So how do you work the people relationships as well as you possibly can? I used to think it was about the subject matter. And so then after a while, I realised, it's about other things as well. So maybe that's helpful.
Thank you. Hi, good morning, and thank you for that wonderful talk. It's the perfect Monday morning inspiration that we needed. I'm a visiting fellow from India here, supported by a DFAT fellowship. And I work on infrastructure logistics. And again, it's a male dominated industry in India. And I'm in a place in my career where I have both mentors and mentees. And one thing I wanted to get your insights on is I struggle with asking them, like, I struggle with a lot of women struggle with the point how to not take things personally when a mentor says no. Like, so, it becomes an issue that perhaps I was not good enough. And that's why, and Marika, like you said, there are a million other thoughts going on in their head. So how do you explain that to someone? Thank you.
To be honest, I came to a realization about a year ago after working for way more than 20 years is actually exactly that point. It's not personal. When you're discussing or maybe there's a bit of tension or people disagree, it's actually you've got to absolutely take the personal away from it, and it needs to be the outcome for the project or the research. And I think if where you are in your learning and career and your research career, if you get that lesson this week, that's really important. Take it. Like, nothing is really personal, to be honest. It's all about communications and getting the job done, I think. What do you think?
And are you saying specifically about somebody's asked you if you'd be their mentor and you're saying no? Or are you saying, yeah, yeah? It's always hard because it's like anything. It's like even internally in a company or in the uni, if you apply for something, you don't get it, people feel personally affected. And I don't think there's much you can do about that because it comes down to each individual's personality. The best you can do is actually hope that in your case, if a mentor is saying no, they deliver that message constructively. And in the case of a mentee, you deliver that constructively. So if a mentor's saying no, if they give you the reason why, like, look, I would love to, but I actually don't have time, or maybe I'm not the best suited for you. Have you thought about somebody else? I just can't. I've got 5 mentees and I really, between juggling that and other things, I can't add any more. But should one of those fall away, I'd be sure to reach out to you. I mean, like, it depends how you deliver the message. And I think at the end of the day, we all have to suffer disappointments, and it's how you deal with them and how you move on. And if you're the one being disappointed, just say, if they don't give you a reason, just say, well, why? Can I ask why you said no? And hear their answer, and hopefully they give you the answer that it's not about you, it's not personal. They don't have time. In my case, it'd be, I actually don't do that. I don't do mentors. So don't ask me to be a mentor because I do informal mentors with people that I either know or have a coffee with someone when people ask. I don't formally mentor. So it's just a personal thing for me. So hopefully you wouldn't get offended if you came and asked me that, because I'd just say, look, I just don't do that. But a cup of coffee I can do. So I think it's all about how you deliver the message. And I'd say that's the same thing throughout life. It's how you communicate with someone. And if someone wants to take that personally, you can't do anything about that. That's them. And they need to develop their emotional intelligence, basically, because they're going to get disappointments throughout life and they'll have to learn how they deal with it and use that.
Anything to add?
No, I think Marika said it perfectly.
Maybe I can ask a question.
Yeah.
So, well, first of all, thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing your knowledge with us. I just wanted to also mention something before I ask a question. Hermione actually mentioned that one of the regrets that she had was that she was fearful reaching out to people, and I was in the same situation. I was actually kind of following Hermione's work for a while, and then I was kind of shy reaching out, and I had something, I have to reach out to Hermione and introduce myself. So once actually this thought of, having this seminar popped up, I said, can I invite Hermione? Can we also invite Marika? Because, that's kind of, a way to kind of network, going to someone with a reason. With something, with a proposal. So that was also something. But also my question is that because my field of research also is in transport and logistics. And I realized that because it's a very, male-dominated environment, sometimes it's very difficult to change the dynamic of relationships, because I realized that, for instance, when I was doing a postdoctoral research, that was funded by Port of Brisbane, the director of institute in the university, whenever they wanted to make decisions in terms of, extending the contracts or getting a research grant or something, they were kind of arranging, like, for instance, going to a rugby play with the logistics manager, or going to a pub and having beer on Friday evening until, staying late night. And they never actually invited me, and they were telling me that without that you will not enjoy the environment. It's very, but we're going to actually make the deal, so it's going to benefit you, but then without, you will not enjoy rugby. So I was kind of, offended at some points, and then I'm still, struggling that how can I change this dynamic? How can I say, hey, no, let's just have this, I don't know, over lunch or coffee or something. And because they perceive that as it's better if you have, a deal over a beer or something like that. So what has been your experience?
Do you want to go first, Hermione? Do you want to go?
Yeah, you want me to go first?
Yeah, go.
Right. Okay. It's all about people. And if they want to go to rugby, say, I love rugby. Because what we want is to be included in the decision making. So this is tactically clever. So unfortunately, it does lead to sometimes drinking too much. And if you don't drink alcohol, then pretend you're having a gin and tonic, but it's a tonic water. Put it in a fancy glass, put a bit of lemon with it, and pretend it's a gin and tonic, whatever. But I think the really important thing is that it's the informal with work. It's the lunchtime discussion. It's the after night discussion. Like, I had small children, and lucky I had a great partner, still do. But you have to actually push to be there. And one of the things that I found, and this is probably something about my character, which is scary. I might be scary to you all, but I hate it when men don't treat us as human beings. I hate it. And so I push. So that's what I've always done. And I realized very early, I was working in male-dominated industry. I was really enjoying it. But you have to push so that you're involved in what they're doing. So that's the nature of people and clubs, unfortunately. And then I think once you're in it, not that I ever want to be in the club, but you have to try and break down those barriers by actually being inside that tent to break down the barriers. So that's what I've probably done all through my career. And it's difficult and it's awkward, but how do you break it down? You can't break it down by not being there. It's a really awkward thing about sexism in our society. It's about the socialization of men and women. It goes back millenniums of centuries. It's not just us. So I do think in a career, my view has always been, I'll be there. And I'm going to be there and I'm going to participate. And there's no reason. I hate rugby. Similarly with golf. I can't stand golf. But I won an oven playing golf at North Sydney Golf Course. It was the booby prize. But I was there. So I think we have to, if we want to work in male-dominated industries, then stop thinking about gender, and we've just got to be there. And they're not approaching it as a gender issue. They just happen to like really boring things like rugby and golf. So that's how I see it.
I'm laughing, Hermione, because all of that is exactly what I think, well, I've experienced as well. And definitely the trick is get a tall glass and put lemonade in it and buy them a gin and tonic. So it definitely works. And I agree with Hermione. I was laughing when you said that, Hermione. So, yeah, I would say the same. The problem was if they didn't ask you. I think if they ask you, then it's a bit like Hermione, you just go. You may not like rugby, but I've found that everything in person is actually better than when you watch it on TV. So actually going to see a rugby match, I'm not a rugby person either, so I'll go. It'll be enjoyable. You talk to the people there. There's nothing, challenging about it. I've had to play golf too. I wish I won an oven though. I usually just get the bird poo crapped on me when I go to the trees to find my golf ball. So you do just do those things. The problem was they didn't ask you. And I think that's where you need to sort of step up and just say, look, can I come too? Or next time, would you mind asking me? And they'll say, you don't like rugby or you don't like golf. Yeah, I may not, but actually I wouldn't mind going to see one. Haven't been to one, or I like seeing them in person. I don't follow it, but I don't mind watching the game. So just take that opportunity to say, hey, could I come too? Or next time, could you invite me as well, please?
Yeah. Or how come you left me out? How come you didn't invite me? That's not fair. Making a bit of a joke of it, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the scenario you painted was pretty unfortunate, and hopefully we don't see much more of that in these coming years. I hope things are changing a little bit. But on a slightly different approach, I'd be quite proactive. So one strength that I think women have are, organising events and bringing people together and connecting people and each other. So wherever you can, if you're after decisions to be made or deals to be done, set them up. Like you set up the coffees, you bring together people around the table, and take the first move if you can. So get in there, go for it.
So another thing is, as you become in a more responsible position, is sort of adding some alternatives. So when I was department chair, we always had this departmental golf outing, which was amazing because all the alumni came and it was great. But I realized I was happy to show up for the lunch and see them kick off. But I didn't participate, but there were a lot of people that didn't participate. So we actually instituted a kayaking trip. And so it was 2 hours on the river or 3 hours on the river. And the first time we did it, we had 45 people show up. It wasn't as many as the 150 for the golf outing, but people appreciated because other people felt, male and female, felt excluded from the golf outing. And so it's starting to think about different things. And this is sort of using some of those organizational skills to do that. So other questions?
If you also could introduce also. Okay, yes. Hi, everyone. My name's Yemi Penn. I'm a bit of a curious rebel because if you ask me what I do, I can't give you one sentence. I'm a mechanical engineer, but I came here 10 years ago from the UK because I really wanted to work on Sydney Metro. However, for the past 6 years, I've been facilitating the goal-setting element of a mentor-mentee session at UTS. And what's been really interesting, and this is a question to the panelists, what's been really interesting is that the theme I found with the mentees wasn't really about the goal setting. It was firstly just identifying that they were worthy enough to even set a goal. That was number one. The fact that I think some of us have lost the skill of setting a goal because it means you've got to dream unreasonably. So I completely got quite rebellious and changed the whole nature and really put a human-centered approach. But what I also found out is that I potentially, while I had been in industry, was in an echo chamber of what different generations and cultures around the world want. And these are the people who are sitting in the education establishments. I'm really interested, for those of you who are currently really neck deep in industry, at any point do you ever think, I wonder what different generations, what culture, what issues, what challenges they're having, or is there an assumption that they just assimilate into the culture we have obviously grown up in? Like really, it's not genuinely not a trick question, but really interested to find out if that's even dialogue that happens in your workplaces. Curious rebel.
No, I'm happy for you to go. Come on. Yeah, the whole thing, probably more about demographics, in terms of age rather than cultural. I think in the cohort that sort of I'm with, it is interesting, and it is a challenge to understand what actually works with different generations as they're coming through. And it's been really complicated by the whole work from home, COVID, remote experience. And I think we're in a position where we don't really know, because we have this complication of a different age group profile coming through, but we've got a hybrid work environment. And I think, as it's always been the case, it's not one size fits all anyway. Never would you say, even in my generation or other generations, you would never say it was the same. Everybody wanted the same thing. I mean, you've sat here, Hermione and I have said, well, we benefited from an informal process. Other people benefit from a formal process. People benefit from different things. The question is, can you fit a program that is one size fits all? And I don't think you can. So people need to start to learn what works for them. Are they going to want to commit to a regular mentor-mentee? Do they know who their mentor is or the mentee is? Do they have a relationship? Are they going to resonate with the person that they're being connected with? I think all of those things are such big unknowns that it could fail for a whole lot of reasons, a formalised relationship. So I do think what the current generation want or need is not clear, because it's still evolving with the whole hybrid piece. And I don't know how long that's going to take to actually land, to be honest. I would have liked to have thought we'd be clearer by now, but I feel like we're not. I don't think unis are. My daughter goes to uni, and I don't feel like she gets a really good environment for meeting people and socialising with people. I mean, she's not at New South, she's at Sydney, but I just feel that it doesn't have that sort of connection with individuals and building your cohort that it used to have when I went to uni. So we're in a really dynamic time where it's going to be interesting to see where it lands. So I don't think that answers your question. I'm sorry, but I don't think I've got an answer. No, all good. Hermione?
Yeah, it is a really, really good question. And probably I'd break it down to the fact that I think even in my career, working in a few departments, government departments, a few corporatised statutory authorities, two universities, and then going to two others. And then now in my world of work, no two cultures have been the same at any time. Even from one floor in a government department to the next floor, in one faculty of a university to the next. Every culture is a different group of people with a different slant, is what I've found. And I agree with what Marika's saying about the generations and the very tricky situation we are in now, trying to work out the world of work for people that have a different sense of what it's all about. And maybe, a sense of entitlement too, which is a very affluent society going forward for a very long time, where people think that what they've always had or what their parents had is what they should have. And so there's some really complex issues in there. But my rule of thumb is an adage from my parents, and they're English background. There's none so queer as folk. And that's the way I see it, that wherever you go in life, you have as much difference as you have similarity. And what I'm looking at with these generations, the new generations of people coming through universities, I really do feel sorry for them, because it's so hard compared to the way we could have lunchtime discussions and meeting people, because everything was face-to-face. And I think Marika's right that the way in which businesses are trying to, and society is trying to work out the world of work now, it's really tricky. But you've got to find your people. I mean, we're people. If you read the book Sapiens, I can't remember who wrote it, but it's absolutely brilliant. A book called Sapiens. It's all about us as human beings and human beings as animals. And animals, what do we need? Unfortunately, we need gossip, which really scared me. But anyway, it's a really good way to bring us back to what are we? We are animals, and we require tribes, and we require relationships. And how do we negotiate that is the tricky way of life. And we're all learning that every day. No one knows that stuff.
Ben, I don't know what you think, ladies, but I think one of the most beneficial things, even beyond mentor-mentee, because it comes back to Hermione's constant point of it's all about interacting with people. It's how you interact. How do you become effective at that interaction in different circumstances? It's actually more about understanding people and emotional intelligence and engagement. And we've been doing some programs in my own business that we roll out, which gets staff they get assessed based on their different personal preferences and the way in which they engage, their values, and it sort of gives them an insight into their own personal preferences. So, for example, who is risk averse and where are they on a scale of risk aversion, and what motivates people? Is it their value system? Is it something else that's motivating them? And then we get them in a room when they're in certain levels across the business, and they each share that. It's a facilitated process, and it's done in a very encouraging sort of way, and it's designed to show them all that everybody's different. And it's quite interesting. We ran it again recently, and I checked in with some of the senior managers and said, how did you find that program? They said, oh, it was amazing. They said, now I understand why every time I ask that person for something, I don't get it. I get this other thing and now I get it. So now I know I've got to ask it differently, or I have to approach it differently. Or now I know they don't do things straight away. They take time, so I'll give them a different deadline. And it's just about understanding the people you're with and then working out your strategies on how do you best leverage that. And I actually think some of that, and learning more about yourself, there's a lot of people who lack self-awareness. They think they're one person and we see something entirely different. And I think focusing more on those things for individuals, I think can be more powerful and more effective than, say, just a mentor-mentee relationship, unless the mentor knows them and can say, hey, and is willing to sort of say, maybe you need to think about the way you approach this or how you react to situations. So to me, I think maybe thinking about those areas and maybe encouraging people to learn more about themselves and others might be beneficial.
I agree.
Well said. Something slightly related to what you both said was in one of the videos we had, Pat Mokhtarian from Georgia Tech talked about the importance of integrity as a mentor and a mentee, and sort of, I want you to be honest. I want you to work hard. I want you to be motivated. And in return, I will respond with these kinds of things. And that, to me, was very important. And sort of this coming back to the culture, it's the culture of having integrity is really important. And it really disturbed me when one day I was on the light rail and I'm listening to the engineering students talking about buying solutions to homework and exams. And it really upset me. They were very proud of it. And I don't know how we deal with these things, but in terms of that relationship, we want this integrity, and this is a part of it. So really very important this is, again, emotional intelligence, self-awareness. You're not doing anything for yourself if you're buying solutions to things or faking results or saying that you've worked harder than you actually did, and being honest about there are these other things going on in my life that are distracting me, and I need to address these. So these are all important. I'm just wondering if anyone in the audience has a mentee experience or a mentoring experience that they'd like to share. Anything in particular? Something that's worked really well or not worked? Thank you. So there was a couple of other things that I wanted to bring up just before we ask the panelists to sort of give some closing comments. One is the feeling of the imposter syndrome. How many have ever felt it? Right? I don't belong. Am I supposed to be here? And sharing that concept is important. that oh, am I really supposed to be doing this? This is, again, having the courage to get out and talk and say, well, I'm there, but discussing it with people. It's not the kind of thing, it's finding somebody you can sort of say, should I be really doing this or should I not be doing it? What are the pluses? What are the minuses? You're not asking for them to make the decision, you're asking to be done. The other concern is the queen bee syndrome. This is the idea of the people who've been successful are the queen bees and they don't have time to deal with me. And I hope in seeing this panel today, you've seen some successful people who are willing to come and give you an hour and a half of their time and talk about their experiences and share some ideas, and the idea that we can have different approaches to all these different things. So, these are things that we experience. You are fortunate that you're getting some more role models in trying to do this. I hope everyone comes away from this saying there's not a silver bullet for how you be a mentor or a mentee. There's different ways, and you can't undervalue the importance of informal mentoring, or whatever you want to call it, but you also need coaches and sponsors and other supporting mechanisms, or just people to have a brief discussion with, and not a long-term commitment. So I'd like to sort of wrap up by asking each of the panelists to have any closing thoughts, advice, comments. Hermione, we'll start with you online because you're right there.
Okay, I'm right here. I think I'm bringing it back to the fact that women in transport is women in male-dominated industry, except if you're, say, as I was saying earlier, maybe in academia or maybe in government, you're going to have more women around you. In different departments you might not, but you have an equity diversity program in universities and you have a real interest in things, which is a bit different maybe to people in the males that you come across in work environments. But the thing that I would say is that probably all of the women in this room are very cerebral. So we really look at our intellect, and we're all people that study, and we do courses, and intellectually we really put a lot of energy into that. And therefore, I think this group of women may well be cerebral people, people that really enjoy intellectual pursuit and endeavour. And that's a particular type of person and a particular mindset. And then in the world of work, what I've found, this is my little gem that I'm going to share. In the world of work, what I've found is that men might be also cerebral and might have a degree in engineering or whatever, but they aren't as serious as we are intellectually. And relationships, so a man in work is a different being almost to the way in which maybe some of us would be in work. And part of our brain needs to get us to understanding the people that we want to connect well with. And relationships are really important to men in work. So I think that interpersonal side of things is really critical. And I agree absolutely with Marika about, psychometric testing, get to know yourself, try and do things to understand your own ways, because it's then how do you interact with people and how do you understand yourself better. So maybe that's helpful.
Great. Rebecca.
Thank you. Transport is fundamental to creating and connecting wonderful communities and societies. And you're all here today because you are part of that and you've got something to contribute. We really need you. And so what I'd love you to think about today is, what do you need from yourself and from each other and from our industry so that you thrive? And how can you help not only yourself, but how can you help others and your community in helping us provide the very best transport connections that we possibly can? And that transport, it needs great design, it needs great planning, it needs great operators, whether you're in a control room or whatever you're doing. There's wonderful, wonderful opportunities in transport, and our communities thrive when we do our best work. So please look after yourself. Think about, out of today, what are you going to do that might be a bit different? What action are you going to take Do you want to get a mentor relationship? Do you want to get a coach? Do you want to set your own personal goals and just check in with yourself every now and then? And I think most importantly, how can you help each other?
Probably just a couple of things. Look, mentoring is relevant to both male and female, and I would say for both genders, don't limit your mentors to one gender. Certainly, I think for most of my career, I don't think I've had that many women that I would have as mentors. So don't just think, particularly if you're female, don't just think, oh, I need to find a female mentor. Make sure you diversify that and touch, as I said, informal's good and lots of different people, but make sure you're also looking at the males, because obviously in our industry, they're probably the more senior people as a majority. Having said that, for the women in the room, certainly in our industry, I'm seeing a lot more women in coming into the industry. They're not all at the senior levels yet. They will get there, but it's definitely changing. So where, I might be the only woman in the room, now Hermione and I might be the only women in the room, but there are more women coming in to that room, and it's definitely noticeable. So I feel like some of these issues that have been raised, hopefully they're not going to continue, because you have got that change not just in the gender makeup, but change in the approach of how organisations are operating. So I'm optimistic that these things are becoming less and less of an issue, and so that will stand you in good stead. And so then I'd just reinforce the other pieces. It is about the people, as Hermione said. I think that's really important, how you interact with people, and what you give, you will get back. So I would say just make sure that you're interacting with the widest possible circle of people, then sort through that and say, who are the ones that I think actually are quite I align with or are valuable. I'd like to learn more from them. And then, obviously give back as well, just even through just engagement and building that rapport. That's probably it.
Awesome. I hope everyone's got something out there. I hope you'll join me in thanking our amazing panel for giving up their mornings. We really appreciate it. Thank you. So I'm going to pass it back to Ellie. For you're good to wrap up? Yeah.
I feel that I haven't done my homework properly. Thank you so much. Well, we have lunch here, and also the video. I will actually put the QR code on the screen just now. Please just scan it, go through the videos that the amazing transport professors from around the world, they have recorded themselves, provided their perspective on mentorship, as well as supervision. What do they expect from graduate students or from their students typically? So that's going to be amazing resource, and actually it's like kind of like a living website, I reckon. And we are hoping that also we have more of these events, hopefully next time in UCIT or UTS, and we're going to actually circulate this. So yeah, yes, and networking bingo, yeah.
Sort of see where everyone is, and we have prizes if you finish the whole thing, or if finish a diagonal or a row or a column.
Yes, thank you so much. And also we will send you a survey to also hear your feedback, how to improve such seminars. So please just continue, help yourself with lunch and coffee, fruits, and put your hands together again for yourself and for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye then.
Thanks, Hermione.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
We took a photo. My guys
Yes.
took a photo.
All right.
Yeah, that's
It's nice, yeah.